Welcome back for another wonderful week of the Jeff Tate Sports Podcast. Episode 81 coming to you live on Tuesday, August 25th. And once again, I know I keep saying apology for the change in podcast schedule. I believe now that I'm fully moved into college and the requirements I have of like living at home and the stuff I have to do at home, I don't have that anymore. So podcasts should be pretty regularly on Tuesdays and Thursdays going into this fall. I mean, most of you listen to this are my friends that are college age, and school is going to look different this year, so I should have a lot more time on my hand because I don't have to go to class as much. So that will be a positive. I'm also looking at I thought the podcast has been good ever since probably the first few months I started it. And the first few months were a little bit rough. I had to learn how to actually do a podcast and all that. But I'm very excited that I've kind of gotten some new equipment that I think will improve my podcast delivering. I have a very good iPad now that I can have all my stats pulled up on there, and so I don't have to guess on stats and go from there, which I think will really help the podcast flow and you guys to get more knowledge that will help you ultimately, and hopefully you learn something on the podcast. That's the ultimate goal. So please rate, review, subscribe to the podcast after you are done listening to this podcast. If you enjoy it, share it with your friends. We want to reach a bigger audience, and I really want to have new people on the podcast. Right now, it's been a little hard to get new people on the podcast. Everyone's moving into college. People are very busy, but we're looking at possibly in the next week or two getting Cole Morse back on the podcast to do a little NFL preview because we're almost 2 weeks away from the season. This upcoming Thursday is 2 weeks from the opening night game of the Texans versus Chiefs. And it looks like it's going to happen. I know it's hard to always be super optimistic in this time, but I think we are going to get an NFL season. It might look a little bit weird, but we're going to get it. So today I want to talk about two things. And without doing a podcast last Thursday, I completely missed all of the Detroit Tigers prospect call-ups. I mean, they called up their number 2 prospect, Casey Mize, their number 5 prospect, Tarek Skubal. Both of those are pitchers. And then third baseman, the 6th overall prospect, Isaac Paredes. And I want to get to them later in the podcast. But we're now into our second week of the NBA playoffs. And how good of a 8-day playoff basketball stretch has it been? Tonight, we get 2 game 5s in the Western Conference, and there's series that have been just truly outstanding and very surprising in a lot of aspects. First, we have the Denver Nuggets against the Utah Jazz. The Denver Nuggets won the first game of the series. I predicted that the Nuggets would win in 6. Well, the Nuggets have to win the last 3 for that to happen because they're down 3-1. That series is fascinating. You have Donovan Mitchell, who's gone for 50-plus twice in this series, and both teams aren't relatively fully healthy. Yes, the Jazz came into the bubble with their team, and that team has stayed together, obviously without the help of Bogdan Bogdanovic, because he has a broken wrist, isn't going to play the rest of the year, but the Denver Nuggets have some very key pieces that they haven't even gotten the whole bubble, but were expected to, and that's Gary Harris and Will Barton, 2 starting guards for that team. Very good defensive players. I mean, right now, Gary Harris would probably be guarding Donovan Mitchell. I'm not saying he would limit Donovan Mitchell to not getting these 50-point games because Donovan Mitchell is just a special offensive talent, but I do think it would help a lot if they had Gary Harris, and he's questionable tonight, so hopefully we see him. And then the fifth, or our last game tonight, we only have 2 games. Every day we've been having 4, but the Celtics and the Raptors swept their respective series over the 76ers and Brooklyn Nets, so they're all done playing. The Miami Heat have also swept the Indiana Pacers 4-0. So all the East is pretty much decided because the Bucks are going to win. But back to the Clippers and Mavericks. I mean, Luka, what is there, to say about this young kid? I was having a talk with my friend, and I was wondering, is that dude a top 5 player right now? And I think you can make a lot of arguments for him being top 5. This is a guy who sprained his ankle in game 3 and came back in Game 4. Kristaps, right before tip, out, not going to play. And Luka's like, knows if we don't win this game, there's no chance. He went on to provide a stat line for the ages. 43 points, 17 rebounds, 13 assists on 18 of 31 from the field. What I really like about Luka is people criticize him for not being a good three-point shooter, and yet he has the confidence at the buzzer to do a step-back jump shot over Reggie Jackson for the win. You miss that shot, the series is over. You're down 3-1 against one of the best teams in the NBA in the Los Angeles Clippers. Instead, you make it, and now the series is evened up, and you never know what happens. Tonight, if the Clippers lose, the Mavs only have to win one of the last 3 games, and it's fascinating because the Mavericks, besides him and Kristaps, really aren't that great of a team. They have a lot of good role players that have just stepped up. Like Tim Hardaway's been outstanding. Dorian Finney-Smith, big-time shot maker. Trey Burke has been excellent. It's just all in all, this team is solid. And you only wonder what 2-3 years into the future this team looks like. Because Luka's only going to get better. And you can, when people see that Luka is like, I feel like Luka's a very easy player to play with. So people are going to want to go play with him. And you never know what kind of free agent you could get into Dallas there. I'm just super excited to watch this game tonight because I don't know what's going to happen. Like, the Clippers, on paper, are a far better team. They have no injuries right now except Pat Beverly. They're full strength in terms of the bench squad and Montrezl Harrell and Lou Williams. Paul George has been struggling. I don't really get the fair criticism of him. Paul George is a top 15 guy in the NBA. He's just off a few games. Like, that's what happens when you're. It's something people are overreacting, and I don't really buy into the criticism of Paul George. He's just not had a good series, and I mean, we've seen Paul George before the quarantine playing the Lakers. Went for 38 and definitely looked like the best player on the Clippers over Kawhi. So Clippers, they need this game tonight because you don't want to fall into a 3-2 hole against a team that has a player as unique and talented as Luka Doncic is. Staying in the Western Conference, the LA Lakers Portland Trailblazers series has kind of lost its flair because first game Portland Trailblazers won, looked pretty good, pretty dominant. Now the Lakers did shoot 5 of 32 that night, and for anybody that watched the Lakers this year, they knew they weren't a good three-point shooting team, but they knew that they were not really that bad of a team. 5 of 32 from 3 is a horrible night for almost every team. And the Lakers have kind of bounced back and shown that that is not who they are and have done a fair enough job of dealing with Dame, dealing with CJ, dealing with Carmelo, and now have won the last 3 games. And last night really showed in my opinion, the best player in the NBA, and that's LeBron James. And I know people might not agree with me on this, but there is not a player in the NBA that impacts his teammates more than LeBron James does. If any of you watched the telecast last night, Chris Webber talked about speaking with Juwan Howard and how LeBron goes 0 dark 23, which is his way of saying locking in mentally and physically to the grind of the playoffs. Usually he turns off social media, gets off his phone and everything. This year's a little different because of the bubble. He needs to be able to stay in contact with his family because he doesn't get to see them on a daily basis. But he makes, and Juwan Howard, who played with LeBron in Miami, went on record saying that helps the other team because they see how locked in their best player is, and it makes them respond. LeBron in a very crucial game 4 where if you give the Blazers a game there and it's 2-2, it's a lot like what the Mavericks-Clippers series is. You don't know what you're giving your opponent, and things could get rough, and it can be a struggle for your team to bounce back from the momentum change there. When you're up 2-1, you lose 2-2. Now the other team has all the momentum. Well, LeBron said, no, I am the king, and it wasn't a game at all at any point. I mean, the first quarter, the Lakers outscored the Blazers 43-25. They put up 80 points in the first half, and LeBron, in only 28 minutes, the guy had 30 points, 6 rebounds, 10 assists on 10 of 12 shooting from the field. It's just, I don't understand the hate for LeBron James. LeBron James is, like, if you think about it in comparison, he's a 35-year-old. Like, Carmelo's 35. Carmelo doesn't even look anything near what LeBron is. Carmelo has one thing he can do, and that is a post fadeaway jump shot. And in this, like, I'm not hating on Melo. Melo's one of the best scorers there's been in the NBA. But if you think about LeBron at age 35, he's chasing down Anthony Simons to block it on one end, and then pushing it up the floor, doing a crazy reverse layup that's just not what a 35-year-old should be able to do. And the criticism for LeBron is not fair because the dude's talented, and I just don't get the criticism of LeBron James right now. People say he's not a top 5 player right now. Are you kidding me? Like, I have a friend that honestly believes LeBron was the 3rd best player in this series. And I don't know how you can say that because Dame is great. Dame is a very good basketball player. But Dame is very unique. He's a 3-point shooter that can create his own shot. LeBron James makes every single player better on the court. And I don't know. I love Dame, by the way. But I don't see it that Dame is better than LeBron James in this series. Even AD, I'm not mad at AD because AD and LeBron are the best duo in the NBA, in my opinion. And one guy can have a down day and the other can pick it up. Like AD, 18 points yesterday and only 17 minutes, barely played in the second half. That's perfect for the Lakers. Get AD some rest. So in the West as well, you have the Rockets against the Thunder. And this game's 2-2, or this series is 2-2. Very good series. Rockets went up 2-0. OKC's won the last 2. And I think the Rockets will win that series, but that's a very competitive series. A very well-played basketball series as well. And I will probably talk about that later in the week because that game's going to go, I think, to a Game 7, honestly. And that might be our only Game 7 to talk about. So right now, 3 teams have punched their tickets to the next round in the Eastern Conference, none in the West. Tonight, you might get one in the West with Utah Jazz, possibly closing out the Denver Nuggets. So today, on this day in sports history, I have a little golf fact for you. And in 1996, it was the 96th U.S. Golf Amateur Championship. And for those of you that don't know, a golf amateur championship is, like, most of the time it's your top college players and some of your top high school players, even if they're that good. And Tiger Woods won the U.S. Amateur for a second U.S. Amateur, and all in all dominated. Beat the field by multiple strokes, and really announced his presence as the best golfer that there is going to be going forward. And let's be honest, that has stayed true. So when I come back, I want to get into some of the Detroit Tigers' top prospects. As many of you know that have listened to this podcast since I started it back in January, I'm a Detroit Tigers fan, and that was great about 10 years ago, and now it's not the best, but it's very encouraging going into the future that we have a lot of top prospects. And at the beginning of the year, the Tigers looked really good. They were in first place in the division. Well, they dropped back to last in the division, and fans started calling Al Avila, let's call up the prospects. Let's get them some big game experience. And Al Avila, general manager, did this on Monday night. And last Monday night, he called up 3 of our top 6 prospects, our top 2 pitching prospects in Casey Mize and Tarek Skubal, and then one of our better infield players in Isaac Paredes. I'm going to have to get used to that. It's Tarek Skubal. It just looks like Tariq, but Tarek. Tarek Skubal is on a pitching or innings restriction because he actually dealt with COVID and is still building up his stamina to go deep into games. So he started Tuesday night against the White Sox. Game didn't go great. Casey Mize started the next night. He looked pretty good, but ended up not getting the win. And then Isaac Paredes has played a lot, honestly, over the first 10 or 8-9 days. So when you look at these Detroit Tigers and what they're doing, it's good because you got to get these guys some big game experience. I want to dive into some stats real quick for the 3 guys that have played. And Tarek Skubal has now started 2 games. He started Tuesday night, and then he started this past Sunday. And he is 0-1 with a 10.38 ERA, 4.1 innings pitched, and 6 strikeouts with a whip of 2.77. So stats don't look good, I'm not going to lie. But what I've noticed from him and Mize specifically is their stuff looks really good. They're getting blooper singles that chase in 1 run. And when you compound all these, it turns into a poor statistical start. I'm not worried. I mean, these guys are young. They're both 23 and have a ways to go. But you see the talent here. And you move into Casey Mize right now. He's been, I would say, a lot better. Last night had a start against the Cubs where he had really good stuff, but not great command, which led to the Chicago Cubs, which is a very good lineup, getting quite a bit of hits. So in Mize's 2 start, he's 0-1 with a 7.04 ERA, 7 2/3 innings pitched, 9 strikeouts, and a 1.83 walks hits innings pitched, which is what WHIP is. And all in all, I mean, the goal of this season with a 60-game season is get these guys some experience. Like, these guys are our future, and you have to give them an opportunity to show what they're capable of. If you don't do that, you're doing a disservice to those individuals, and it doesn't help them going forward. You look at Isaac Paredes on the offensive end. I mean, the guy's 20 at-bats this year, a 250 average, 1 home run, 6 RBIs, and his 1 home run was huge. I mean, it was Friday night against the Cleveland Indians. We had to beat the Indians in over 20 games, and he had a grand slam. He shows that he has a lot of power, and he shows what he can do. And what he can do is be one of the better hitters this Detroit Tigers system has, and one of the better defensive players we have. Going forward, it's going to be truly outstanding to watch these 3 play. And we're going to have more come up. I mean, Matt Manning is one of our better pitching prospects. Spencer Torkelson, we're probably seeing a year. It's all in all a great time to be a Detroit Tigers fan. And they also have some pretty good guys around them. I mean, Nico Goodrum's been solid this year. Jonathan Scope's been our best hitter. Miggy has shown some things. I mean, average is terrible, but he shows that he can deliver a clutch hit. All in all, it's a team that is kind of fun to watch on some nights. Like, some nights they just have an offensive explosion and show why fans are very excited. And then some nights they show why they are not the best team. And it's just what you have to do in a rebuild, because you have to be able to understand that these guys aren't going to be pros right away. Like, it's not like the NBA when you draft a guy at number 1 and he comes into your franchise and changes it, like Zion Williamson. You have to be patient with them because they're learning. Like, it's not easy to be a professional baseball player. You go from the minor leagues to the majors where guys are much better hitters and can hit all of your pitches. And Casey Mize has kind of learned that quickly. But it's only encouraging to watch these 2 going forward. And Isaac Paredes. So, this will wrap up the Jeff Tate Sports Podcast. Hopefully you guys enjoyed this podcast. Please rate, review, subscribe to the podcast. And I'll see you guys back here later this week for episode 82.